You see tons and tons of Best Ball Mania, draft puppies, all these different draft streams, particularly here on Spike Week. But today we're going to start a little something special. The Spike Week gang is drafting in the Bulldog, a high stakes $500 tournament on Underdog, slow drafts only. So we're going to start today, kicking off our first round pick and some of our general strategy for this tournament. And we'll be recording episodes every pick hereafter. Let's get into round one. All right, guys. So really quickly before we hop into here, this is fun. I think this is the first time all four of us have been together on a show. Shout out. I'm sick of talking to Rob, so we don't even need to talk to Rob. Trev and Silas. And of course, Silas is going to be running the ones and twos for us here on this draft. But really quickly, before we start to pass it to you guys to start talking about what we want to accomplish here in this tournament, I did want to run down what the heck is the Bulldog, right? In the intro, I mentioned it's a little more of a higher stakes tournament. So the four of us are going to draft it together on Underdog. It is a $500 entry. What does this say? 432 total teams in the whole tournament, right? A $200,000 prize pool with 30,000 to first place. It's a pretty sweet structure, actually. And then obviously has the same typical, two teams advance out of the regular season into the 15, 16, 17 with
it's
the 17.
Four.
See, look at that.
This is why I should be doing the intros here, Eric, because you don't even know that there's four teams that advance. Which
this is the first time I've even looked. This is the first time I've even looked at the Bulldog.
It makes your odds so much better to get through, like the big dogs and stuff like that, or have done this, a lot of the higher stake stuff. But I don't think that's what we got to talk about as we go through these picks. Like, is that going to change our strategy because you're advancing a third of the field as opposed to, just 2 out of 12. So that's what makes these higher stake stuff a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting, because the variance of the teams that get through to the playoffs are going to be much greater based on the amount of teams that are actually advancing through.
So as you said, I should have pulled this up, obviously, before we started speaking, but you see 432 total teams in this tournament, which is kind of interesting also when you think about it this way. There's only 36 total drafts that happen in this, right? So there's only 36 Justin Jefferson teams, as an example, something we'll think about as we talk through our picks. As you guys mentioned, top 4 move out of your initial 12-team league, and then the top 2 move out in the next round, which is
2 of 6, which is pretty crazy.
6-person groups in round 2. So got a pretty good shot, as you said, to move on there. And then top 1 out of 6, again, with a final round of just 8 teams. So really, really, clean paths all the way through to the finals. Silas, you were the one that registered for this. How are you kind of thinking about the Bulldog before we hop into our first round pick in terms of, does anything change, right, with this structure, the smaller field and the easier advancements?
Yeah, so I think micro edges are going to be huge, just by the fact of, more teams are going to get through. So, you're not going to get a lot of similar rosters in ensuing weeks, right? Just because top 4 advance, you're going to have a big change in how everybody drafts. And, it's going to kind of be a hodgepodge of all the different types of teams. It might get similar towards the finals with only 8 teams being there. It's kind of going to be piggybacked by probably 1 or 2 guys who go off in, the week 16, 17, or 15, 16. But, you can kind of get creative, and it really is going to be, I think, correlation and probably the schedule that will kind of push you over the edge. So using those micro edges to your advantage.
Trev, what are you thinking about this tournament? Have you spent any time thinking about different things that you'll do maybe differently, right, in this tournament as opposed to Best Ball Mania or the bigger large field tournaments?
Yeah, it's ironic we have all the sickos on because we don't need to Galbrain as much. But the thing I was thinking is those mid-round guys that absolutely go off. If CMC goes down, Elijah Mitchell takes over, 7 out of the 8 teams in the finals could have one of the same players, and then being different actually does matter, because if everyone's got him, he goes off, then just one less RB spot for the entire field.
Rob, anything else to add?
I think mega stacking teams makes a ton of sense in this format, right? So we always want to stack teams and everything, but we're talking about an 8-person final. So if we show up to the gunfight and we decide we want Cincinnati, Kansas City, and we started with some sort of Joe Burrow, T. Higgins stack, adding Irv Smith, adding Chase Brown, like just getting as much exposure to that team, or even some of the lesser teams. So we can do it with a team like the Seahawks as well, making sure we have Lockett, JSN, or some combination of the 2 wide receivers from them, tacking on Noah Fant, maybe even adding Zach Charbonnet to go with Geno Smith. I think mega stacking teams is like vital almost in this type of format, where we want, at least if we're stacking a team, if we can get 4 to 5 players from that team, is something we want to be looking at.
I think it makes total sense. It kind of combines everything both Silas and Trev said, right? Where we know that with the small field final, if somebody does pop off, like Silas said, or if CMC does go down, like those Eli Mitchell teams just have such a huge edge over everybody. And then there's only so many teams. If all of these advancing teams have Eli Mitchell, right? It's Josh Jacobs from last year. It doesn't mean we don't want Eli Mitchell, but it means the other leverage that you can then create, whether you have him, don't have him, or whatever, setting yourself up to create this leverage, whether it's super onslaught stacking a team or just tiny little things, right? Like there's only 36 drafts in the whole. So like, even you mentioned the Bengals. We know that Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, those are very popular combinations in, say, best ball meaning. We have to be very thoughtful about how we handle, a Chase Burrow stack or Mahomes Kelsey. In this, that's still like 10 to 14 total teams that might have that stack. And so I don't know that you have to as much go out of your way. As Trev said, we don't have to galaxy brain quite as much, but then we can just do really basic things. We know that, right, betting on one team, the Bengals as an example, to have an awesome season is a great way to advance out of your league, especially when 4 teams make it out of there. Bengals have a good season. Congratulations. You have a bunch of really good players who had good seasons on your team. And then it also sets you up for leverage in the playoffs, right? And leverage, I think people really don't worry about it as much in the small field stuff. I actually think it's almost more important, because if you're the one team out of 8, right? Like, let's say you're playing the Thunderdome. You're a big DFS whale on a Sunday afternoon. You're playing this 20-person tournament, huge high stakes, and all these guys are going to have the same teams. I can just be like setting up my leverage and have a bunch of guys that nobody else has, and all I really got to do is hit on 1-2 of those guys, because I don't need to put up this 200+ point week, right? I just got to beat 7 other teams in this final. And so you can do these micro edges, as Silas called it, to just set yourself up perfectly to where you almost can't have this like super chalky team, and you can build to allow yourself to advance really easily, which we know is going to be important here, because it's so kind of easy to advance. How do we take advantage of that and build ourselves leverage in there? Anything else before we start talking about this first round pick?
Just to clarify, like one of those points, just to simplify it, we said there's 36 drafts in this. So even if the drafts, 50% of the teams take Burrow, Chase, or Mahomes, Kelsey, or something, that's still only 18 teams that have that stack, right? Like, so we don't have to worry about that stuff at all, because it's just non-existent in this type of thing, where we're not worried about thousands and thousands of teams building the same way. At most, it's like 18, 19 teams. And like at that point, who cares?
And they could screw it up too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
they're not all guaranteed to advance. I mean, of course, if all these guys are the Josh Jacobs and Cooper Kupps and Mark Andrews of the world, sure, yeah, but that's very unlikely to happen, especially at the prices on some of the teams. So, yeah, I just think being thoughtful as we go through, we're going to record a bunch of these. And every time thinking about everything we just outlined here, how do we, and we get time to talk about it as opposed to 20 seconds to figure it out on the clock. Let me pull up. Silas has got us on. Speaking of on the clock, Silas has got us here on the clock. And you zoom in just a smidge. We are picking 111, which is quite possibly one of the worst spots, of course, to pick. But we definitely don't have like a super crazy wide receiver room. Interesting to see CeeDee Lamb goes off at the 107. Travis Kelce falls to the 108. And then Austin Eckler and Bijan Robinson, which leaves us, of course, AJ Brown. But I'm curious what you guys are thinking here in terms of first round went semi according to plan. But obviously AJ Brown at the 111 is a little bit unique.
I mean, I'm smashing AJ Brown if he's available at the 111,
Yeah.
right? Like to me, this isn't even like a question. If you want to pull the players back up, Silas, we're looking at like it's AJ Brown, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra. AJ Brown is in a tier above all those other guys to me. So it's not even particularly close. And I just think it's the easy smash pick here. And it still allows us outs that if we want to get a second wide receiver, we still may end up with like AJ Brown, Amon-Ra, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, if that's the route we want to go. There are some other ways to play this when we get to the second round pick, but for now, it's AJ Brown, and I don't particularly think it's close.
Yeah, Trev, what do you think? I think we're probably all going to end up fairly agreeable on AJ Brown, but I also want to think about, before we officially make a selection, we did see, Eckler, Bijan, CeeDee got pulled up. It's kind of not like a crazy start, but kind of the ordering was a little bit different. We do have, some of these higher stakes guys. Everybody sees Two Gun and all of their, multi-time Millie winner. I know Need Lunch Money is a big DFS whale. And so how are we just thinking about, these first couple of selections, knowing kind of how this room may unfold? It's clearly not, some wide receiver avalanche. So does that mean we want to be piling on these wide receivers, or how are we thinking about, since we're sitting at the turn?
I mean, I think just best player available at the start, and then you get a guy. I think AJ Brown's up in I'd put him in like the Tyreek Hill tier. Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. I think he's that good. I think the Eagles could pass more, this one's kind of an easy pick to me. And on top of that, they just have he has the best quarterback of all the other wide receivers around, I'd say. Best offense, they were just in the Super Bowl. So I think he's far and away just the best player. And, even if it is a RB heavy room, that just gives us more value at wide receiver. And I'm fine with just pounding them up and going crazy.
Silas, what do you think about AJ Brown? And then what are you thinking, that sets us up for here at the turn? Are we into reaching and trying to create an Eagle stack? Are we going to kind of, Trev mentioned, like best player available, keep pounding? There's guaranteed to be a good wide receiver here left for us, right? Obviously, there's only 2 picks before we're on the board again. Or how are you thinking about what this sets us up for that 202 pick?
Yeah, so kind of how the first 10 or so picks went, like it kind of feels like an FFPC room where, people are not afraid to take running backs, right? I don't feel like we have to reach for a running back. There's 3 that I actually would be fine here, but they'd be fine at 14 as well. I obviously like the wide receivers. AJ Brown feels like the easy pick. The only thing that I could say is, Devontae does have somewhat of a better playoff schedule. Not that I think we have to think about that. You could see the Raiders in shootouts against the Chargers, Chiefs, and then that Colts game. They shouldn't have any secondary whatsoever. Obviously, there's a QB concern. But
I was going to say, you need a QB in order to shoot out.
That is true. That is true, right?
That is something you need.
But I think they both do have similar same game ceiling upsides, right? Like Devontae, you could see put up a 40 bomb at any given point. Doesn't matter who the quarterback is. AJ Brown, obviously, we've seen him throw up 35 to 40 points, and that offense is fantastic. I'd say the one concern a little bit, right, is they should be still a fantastic team. So do they start resting people down the stretch? Mm-hmm. I don't think that overweighs, and I still think AJ Brown's the pick. And then kind of moving forward, like I don't think ADP matters in this because there's only 432 teams. like I think we can feel free, and like if we like somebody and we want to reach for them, like feel free to do it, because one, it's only going to add us, give us some unique leverage, and then two, there's only 36 drafts, so reaching really isn't going to change much for anybody else.
Right. We're not really worried about getting unique combinations. One thing that I'll push back a little bit on is the Eagles resting players down the stretch. Totally a thing that could happen. Their schedule is tougher this year. They're playing the AFC East. They also have the Kansas City Chiefs on their schedule. I think the NFC East as a whole is going to be a bit better this year as well. I think Washington's going to be a bit better. Dallas is going to be Dallas. And even the New York Giants are coming up as well. So I don't think we're going to see them rolling teams quite like they did last year, and not just resting players at the end of the season, but resting them in second halves of games. I think they're going to have to play a bit more, which I think just like raises the ceiling, not just for AJ Brown, but every single Eagle that we want to take is going to have more opportunity throughout this year. I still think they're clearly the best team in the NFC East, but my concerns aren't as heavy about them resting players down the stretch. Could it happen? Of course, but it's not something that's preventing me from drafting anyone from that team.
I think the really interesting part here that I'm excited to get into over the course of the first really few episodes is how these kind of first round picks come together, because we're not, like, obviously at this point we don't really know what this room is going to be, and so obviously me and probably a lot of us lean into wide receivers, or at least being smart about how much we invest in the early running backs. But we're going to have 2 picks in before we really know. I guess if the guy at the turn takes both JT and Saquon or something, that tells us something, but I suspect he'll probably take at least one of these wide receivers, if not 2. And so how we handle that second, I mean, Silas is bringing up Devontae could be there for us, at the 202. I don't think AJ Brown would ever get back to us, and so I think ultimately that's probably why we just take him, and then kind of see that the 202 is going to be a pretty interesting pick, actually. I think for this tournament specifically, because we talked about kind of onslaught stacking. We talked about, how many AJ Brown, Jalen Hurts teams are there even going to be in this tournament? That's something to consider. And then obviously we know the room is probably not going to be a super wide receiver heavy room. So, how do we manipulate that? And I think, but I just like starting with AJ Brown and then seeing at the 202 kind of what this room is going to, what we can do with this room.
And I think the point that you're making there actually opens the discussion at the 202 to everything. We can do the Jalen Hurts stack if we want to, because it's going to, like you said, I think the RBs are going to be a premium just based on the first 10 picks in this draft. I mean, Eckler, Robinson going over AJ Brown isn't something you always see happen. We see Christian McCaffrey. So we have 3 RBs with the potential of a 4th going if Braden in the 12 spot decides to go Saquon or Jonathan Taylor. So there could be 4 RBs off the board early. So if we take Jalen Hurts, it doesn't feel like we're reaching too bad, because it feels like we're going to get some value at wide receiver in the 3rd and 4th rounds that we might not normally get. Not 100% going to happen. I mean, anything could happen. We could get a wide receiver avalanche in the 2nd round here, but I think the value on wide receivers are going to get pushed down a bit, which makes drafting from the back end in these particular drafts probably more likely to want to go 0 RB than we would in other drafts, right? So that's just the stuff that I'm looking at and going to be interested in seeing develop as we draft this team.
I agree. Anything else, Silas or Trev, before we smash this AJ Brown button and wait for our 2nd pick?
I'm all good. I'm all for it. I thought we were gonna have to settle for CD or someone, and AJ Brown just a smash. Yeah,
I know. We got a little lucky, so we'll take AJ Brown. If Silas wants to do let's fire off this first pick, then we'll get ourselves set up for episode 2 of this fun new series we are doing. I think we're calling it the Spike Week Gang Drafts a Bulldog.
Do you not want to use the title that I created for the room?
I'm not even gonna bring that one up on here. I already screwed up once. at the beginning saying that 2 teams advance out of the regular season. I don't need to bring up your nonsense into this as well.
No, that's it for me. I'm excited to see what Braden does at this double tap picks for the 12-1, and then see where we're going to end up going.
Awesome. We'll be back probably pretty quickly, depending upon how long our friend Braden at the turn takes to make this selection. And we will be recording one of these for every single time that we are on the clock here. So you're going to get to see our faces a whole lot over the course of the next couple of weeks as we polish up this Bulldog. But we'll be back shortly for round 2 at the 202 after an AJ Brown start in the Bulldog. Peace.
A few moments later.
So as we signed off from our first pick with AJ Brown, Braden takes his 2 picks right away within 1 minute. So we decided, let's just jump back in. Let's get our second pick going. I'm here still with Eric, Silas, and Trev, as we've decided not to vote anybody off the island. But let's just get right into it and see what Braden did, what he left us with, and where we're going to go. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. So as we pull it up, we see that Braden went with Jonathan Taylor and Nick Chubb. So we were talking that 4 running backs might possibly go in the first round in this draft, and they do. But then a 5th goes right off after Jonathan Taylor with Nick Chubb. He bypasses Saquon to grab Nick Chubb. And that leaves us with a lot of possibilities here. And I'll let Silas start. What are you thinking when you see both of the RBs go? What is your initial gut reaction to it?
My initial gut reaction is to kind of kick running back to the curb. Even though they're really getting hot and frisky, like they're gonna run out of running back picks, especially in the mid rounds. And us sickos, we love a good 0 or hero RB team. That's kind of where I would be leaning. So I'm trying to go towards someone who has significant single game high, like a high ceiling. That's Devontae. Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers, could be Olave, Jalen Waddle, even Amon-Ra. Like all of them could literally pop off this year. I could even sprinkle in that hyper team with Devonta Smith if we wanted to reach down the board and just kind of see what the hell happens. But yeah, those are my initial takes. Kick running back down. Go keep pissing yellow.
I feel yeah. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, what about you? What are you looking at here?
Oh well, I'm feeling the exact same way. It's like it went crazy on running backs early, but really it was just weird that AJ Brown fell. Other than that, it was just Eckler and Bijan went a couple picks early, and they could still hammer wide receivers rounds 2 and 3. And we all know after Rashad Bateman, receivers just get ugly real quick, and there's still a lot of running backs. Except only thing different is I'm probably not Devontae here. I like Garrett Wilson. He probably would be my pick here if it was just me. Just because, man, he did well as a rookie with whatever mashup of quarterbacks with Flacco and Mike White. He's got Aaron Rodgers now, so that's my guy right here. But I think Hurts is also interesting just because we already said, hey, AJ Brown, he's gonna go off this year. If he's doing that, Hurts is probably going off as well.
Eric, where are you looking here? It sounds like we're all going to be on different things, so it's going to be interesting to talk through after we get our initial takes. So I want to know where you're eyeballing.
Well, I definitely agree. Well, with both of them, but what Silas said at first, I think from a strategic and structural perspective, if all these guys are going to be pounding these heavy running backs early, how can we kind of take advantage of that? And I think it's by dominating them at wide receiver, which is kind of something that the group of us like to do anyway. But if the room is really going to give it to us, right? They already gave us AJ Brown a few picks past ADP. Now they're going to let us get another superstar wide receiver here. And we know that we'll be able to kind of make it up at running back, whether it's, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, or, even in those later rounds, there's a ton of running backs that we'll get to there. And if all these guys have 2, 3, 4 running backs by that point already, we're just going to be able to scoop up some really good value, I think, at running back and fill out that room. So I do lean towards non-running back. I would definitely, I'm not opposed to just locking down the Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown thing again in this smaller field. It's generally not something that I personally actually like to do in many of my drafts, but I think that this tournament is pretty different from that perspective. And if we are comfortable that we'll be fine at running back, then it can make some sense. But I do lean towards wide receiver here. I think I don't have a strong take, honestly. I have not really been drafting Devontae, is one thing I will say. But generally, this situation doesn't play out very often, and I have not obviously drafted in this specific tournament. So I would be willing to take Devontae. I generally do take Garrett Wilson over him, but that's really just a personal take. I agree with Trev in that I'm pretty worried about the Raiders as a whole. I'm not worried about Devontae Adams, like in his talent, of course, but I don't really see that they have paths. I guess Carson Wentz would be like the upside case for them at quarterback. That's like what you're pipe dreaming about if this Jimmy thing doesn't work, because it's Brian Hoyer or someone like that after him. Whereas, yeah, the Jets, I guess if something happens to Aaron Rodgers, but like we know that Aaron Rodgers is there and it feels a little cozier to me. And I would rather take a Rodgers than like a Jimmy G in this turn. Like, I don't really ever want to draft Jimmy G, especially now with the level of uncertainty we have about him playing. So I agree with both of you guys about non-running back. And I do think I generally lean to Garrett Wilson, but I'm also not like totally tied to that. I mean, Devontae's still arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. If we just set aside the Jimmy G risks, I could totally see it.
So I think the one thing that all four of us are going to agree on, we're not taking a running back here. It doesn't make sense at all. So I think we can just end that discussion where none of us are looking at running back. I think it's almost the prime spot to take Jalen Hurts for a number of reasons. And I'm in on wide receiver too. I'm not like opposed to taking a wide receiver, but stacking Hurts here with AJ Brown in a room that wide receivers are getting pushed down, which means our third round wide receiver, because that's where we're going to have to go, is going to be better than normal, right? And then our fourth round, because we're going to double tap wide receiver, most likely third, fourth round. Can't imagine a scenario that we're not. And we might end up with, we're probably still going to have the best wide receiver room in the draft at that point. I think it's fair to say. The only guy that could do anything different is like maybe the Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase drafter if they decide to go 0 RB as well. It's just I'm not sure people have the balls to do it a lot of the time, to be perfectly honest. And the other thing we could think about with taking Jalen Hurts and stacking him with AJ Brown in this particular tournament, I'm not saying we have to do this. It's just a thought process. We might not need to take a second quarterback, especially if we're going 0 RB. We could just be getting an extra RB spot there because we're advancing 4 teams. That second quarterback spot doesn't matter to us as much. It's easier to get through. We're already banking and putting the capital into Jalen Hurts that he's the man. There's no regular season prize in this. We don't need to be accruing points. If he's outscoring the field, on a weekly basis, we're making up those points that we're going to take the 0 on. I'm almost inclined to want to take Hurts. I really wish we had like the 7th overall pick because I would want to push the Hurts down and try to get him in the 3rd at that point. We're not going to get him in the 3rd round. We're not going to get him at the 311. That's 100% sure.
Right.
So that's where we need to be looking at. There's an arms race.
I agree with you there. Can I jump in for 1 sec?
Sure.
Wouldn't a better path be take Devonta Smith and get all the passing game work? Expect that they're probably not going to run Hurts as much this year to try and keep him healthy for a playoff run, and he's not really, providing anything on the ground. They're throwing a lot. You get 60% of their pass game work just through their 2 alpha wide receivers. So we're still banking on the Eagles, but then we can at least push Hurts down. He's going to go in the 3rd round because we've kind of seen quarterbacks starting to go later anyway. Might be one of those rooms that, quarterback's going to get pushed altogether. And you kind of see Mahomes, Allen, Hurts kind of get pushed to that later 3rd, which they typically did last year.
It's also not impossible that he would fall back if we have both of those guys. I agree that I don't think that he will. It's not like a strong probability bet. But if this is a little bit sharper room and we take both of the Eagles guys, there's not a lot of incentive for the other players to take Jalen Hurts other than, he's just the best pick on the board. But the only way to possibly get the double stack is by taking Devonta here, because Devonta is not getting back to the 311 either. And to Silas's point, I definitely like again, we're arguing, to a bunch of different awesome scenarios, but theoretically we would allow ourselves to not get, of course, we're not going to get locked out of wide receiver, because we're just going to draft better and more early wide receivers probably than everyone in this room, but we don't have that risk, right? Even that late third round wide receiver is like not awesome, right? It's kind of after Devonta and T, and whether, depending upon what you think of, I think Rob, you even said like DK Metcalf's almost in his own little mini tier there, a lot of those guys might be gone by the 311. And now we're taking the Amaris and the, Ridleys and Mike Williams and Judy and stuff, who are just not as strong. And this allows us to still get that Eagles stack, right? Whether we have Hurts or not, now we have the two superstars from the Eagles. Maybe a sliver of, a 5% chance that Hurts falls back to us because we took both of them. And we're getting this, we're still dominating wide receiver because we didn't detour in the second round for the quarterback. I do think I actually had, shout out to Silas. I didn't think about Devonta Smith really a ton, but I do think it actually makes some sense in terms of we're getting that Eagles kind of bet that Rob was talking about with Hurts without having to spend the second round pick on the quarterback. And, it's going to give us tons of flexibility. Like if we don't get Jalen Hurts, it's fine. We're getting all the passing game from the Eagles, but now it does give us a little bit more flexibility. And if we didn't really have a strong stance on Devonta, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra, then why not put Devonta's name in the hat as well?
Yeah. My only pushback on the point would be, I don't see them changing their offense in terms of Hurts running this year. But I do like the points, because I know we're talking about getting unique doesn't matter in this tournament as much. The one caveat to that, we might be the only team that decides to go AJ Brown with Devonta Smith. And if you're the only
there might be
team,
a Hurts. Yeah, there might be a Hurts. Somebody takes, right, you could get AJ Brown at 7th or something, and then you come back and take Hurts in the second round. But like the Devonta AJ Brown thing doesn't line up, and God forbid we get Hurts in the third round, we will be the only team with those three in this whole tournament.
Yeah, so I do kind of like that. It's because I wasn't thinking Devonta Smith myself, because I was like, if we're going receiver, I had a feeling we were going to go Garrett Wilson over Devontae Adams. But this is kind of like a fun idea and just so different that I'm kind of leaning towards it.
I was gonna say initially, like when we brought it up, I was like anti. And then just talking through it, because right away you see the names up top, and you're like, yeah, draft all those guys before Devonta Smith. Like, think they're gonna do better. But one, we don't know anything. It's a guessing game at this point. And two, it doesn't. We're not good. We don't need to get first in this. We need to get top 4. And even if it sounds bad, it definitely raises our floor almost every week. We're getting 70%.
We're getting a good score.
Yeah,
we're getting a good score no matter what every single week, right? Even like if something happens, well, I guess I shouldn't say this because I keep dunking on Mariota all off season. But like even if something happens to Hurts, these guys are so good that they're probably not going to be like completely horrible. Of course, we don't want that. But like you said, we only need to get in the top 4, and then even in the playoffs, we're just like guaranteeing ourselves a great week out of these guys in the playoffs. We could show up to the final, right? Like if we get the T. Higgins, Jamar Chase situation, like ping pong throughout the playoffs, we show up with the only AJ Brown team, right? Because Devonta went off in the week 16. It just sets it's the micro edge, like Silas talked about when we recorded round 1. It's like setting ourselves up without doing anything really silly to have leverage throughout this whole tournament, even.
Yeah, that last point is exactly what I was thinking about, Eric. Like, we know that these guys kind of flip-flop throughout the season. At least that's what they did last year, right? Like, they had ceiling games back-to-back. Typically, something really wasn't same person 2 weeks in a row. It was kind of the opposite. So you're going to gain, leverage on the field because a lot of people are going to have Devonta Smith. How many of them are going to have AJ Brown? And been based on where his typical ADP is, 7, 8, 9. I think more people probably gravitate towards taking Jalen Hurts.
Yeah.
I don't think they're thinking about scrolling down and taking Devonta Smith.
Agreed.
And
Kind of like it.
Yeah, I was gonna say passing on Hurts, that gives us another chance to push down a Metcalf or someone who probably would go earlier. Someone takes Hurts, and that's another wide receiver, another running back still on the board for us.
Or
I'm also
any of
just-
the quarterbacks, or any of them. Like, even if Hurts goes, if we somehow get Mahomes or Allen and we lock up the Eagles passing game, and then we can just do another stack with either of those other two guys, like, it probably won't happen. But if it does, like, jackpot, right? Like, we're off to the races, and we have such a unique build that even though we say that unique builds aren't as, it doesn't matter as much, we're building two of the best offenses in the league when no one else is going to have them, giving us more outs in week 15, 16, 17. I'm in for Devonta Smith.
I did just want to also add in really quickly, when I look at our projected ownership, AJ Brown and Devonta Smith is a 2% owned pairing, whereas AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts is a 20% owned pairing. And so, of course, that's there's only 36 teams in this. We don't know exactly how that will shake out right when in the end results, but it just goes from a directional perspective. Everything you guys said is spot on. Teams that take AJ Brown are going to go to the quarterback first. They're not going to go to his teammate wide receiver. So if we go to his teammate wide receiver, and yet we're capturing all that pass game, we have the tiny sliver to still get Jalen Hurts or get one of the other elite quarterbacks. We're not ever really going to be locked out a wide receiver now. There's leverage opportunities. It's pretty funny because I wasn't even like super strongly considering Devonta, and then Silas brought him up, and as we talk it through, I do kind of feel like, again, specifically for this tournament, I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's something I probably want to sprinkle in a little more in other stuff too, but for this one specifically, I'm in for the Eagles double if we can do it. Anyone else?
That thing is, I don't even think I'm sold on it. I think I sold you guys on it.
Yeah, right.
That's the
No,
sickest.
it makes sense though. Like, if you talk through it, it does. It's just, I think being able to advance 4 teams to the second round and then 2 out of 6, like, it's
In an
insane.
eight-man final, right? Like in BBM, sorry, I was just to clarify like that. The 8-man final thing and those playoff rounds is super important for this specific thing that we're talking about doing with Devonta. You show up to the BBM final and you spend your first 2 picks on Eagles wide receivers when you know they're probably not going to go off in the same week. There's perks, but like, you're punting off one of your first 2 picks probably in the championship final, and so it's a thinner path to win. In this, there's only 7 other teams. You could punt off your first or second round pick, and it's totally fine.
Yeah. And I think with the small number of teams, we need AJ Brown to go off. If he's going off, Jalen Hurts is probably going off, and there's going to be a lot of Hurts AJ Brown teams at that point. Drafted both of them, and if we do get one of those back and forth, T Higgins, Jamar Chase, let's say weeks 15, 16, Devonta Smith goes off. There's not a lot of AJ Brown teams in the finals. We're easily the only one with an 8-man final.
100%.
Yeah. All right. So my vote is Devonta Smith.
I'm sold.
There we go.
Silas?
Hey, I mean, you're all on it, so yeah.
This
I think
is
it
your
makes
fault.
sense. It's
You did
It's
this.
hard.
You have no one to
It's
you have no one to blame but yourself.
I just like to think things through, No, it's tough because I don't necessarily see his single game ceiling as high as the others, but I like taking a bet on the Eagles offense. So it just makes sense.
I don't disagree with that at all either. I think,
Nope.
Like in a vacuum, you want the other guys, but paths to victory feel better having both of the guys that we're going to have. So I'm in. Let's do it.
All good.
Let's do it.
There we go.
All right. And this is a slow draft. So we're going to be releasing these 2 picks on one video, and we'll probably see you in 3 years for rounds 3 and 4. As we got the back-to-back, 11 pick here. So anything before we sign off, gentlemen?
Nope.
All good.
Cool. All right. Well, we will catch you next time here at Spike Week with this Bulldog draft that we're gonna win $30,000. So, peace. Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there. You can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.